Well, welcome back to our deep dive into the project management body of knowledge. This is Module 5. Today we're going to talk about project charter, project management plan, and all of the project integration management processes, and here they are on the screen. From now on, we're going to be talking about the actual knowledge areas and processes from here on out, all 10 of them. So as you can see listed here are these 6 processes of integration management right out of your PMBOK. So go have a look at Chapter 4 and read all that information to fortify your knowledge that you receive here. So let's get started with 4.1. And we're going to do a little bit of review here during 4.1, and then we won't get as detailed. But I just want to make sure and reinforce that you understand, how to read and interpret this stuff, and then it'll be easier ongoing. So here we go. So here we have circled 4.1, project charter, develop it, and this is an initiating a process group. So here's the large look at just this process, 4.1. It has these inputs that we talked about in our earlier module. From the business side now, we get the statement of work, again, which is different than the scope baseline. Okay, statement of work, what they need at a high level, their business case, which are the financials, which show that this will have benefit financially to the company. Any agreements that may be out there, like blanket orders that may be used by this project, or other agreements could be agreements with a subcontractor organization where you get resources from them to help you build or manage the project. Whatever agreements are in place, you bring in as part of the project charter. You want to get that documented. And your enterprise environmental factors and organizational process assets also come in, and we'll see the details of what those are coming up. And they get washed through this tools and techniques, which in this case is expert judgment and some facilitation techniques that you may need to reach consensus with your group. And you result in the one single output of this activity, which is the project charter, signed, sealed, and delivered. That's what you want. Okay, now don't freak out with this diagram, but what we're showing you here again is the relationship between some of the different views of the same kind of thing. So the top view up here, now you'll be seeing through every knowledge area will have its inputs, tools, and techniques in this kind of arrow. See, it starts here, ends over here, makes sense, but you'll see this view, which is different than the prior view, which lists them, vertically. This is horizontally. And here's your business stuff coming in here, plus your EEFs and OPAs. And down here, these are your process inputs, as we should know by now. On your data flow diagrams, here's data flow diagram, this now, and these are specific now, ongoing to the process itself. In this case, it's 4.1. So here you have your process. Remember, processes don't have those little ears on them. They're just this flat rectangle. That's your process. As opposed to an entity, which are these with the little bookend kind of things. So here's your sponsor, project sponsor, initiator, the business side of things. Will input into project charter these agreements, business case, and project scope of work. Now from the organization, from your business, you will bring in what is appropriate to help you develop the project charter, and those are your OPAs and your EEFs here. So stuff from the business comes in, you grab stuff from your organization that will help you develop the project charter. And once you wash this through your tools and techniques, which by the way, again, tools and techniques are not shown on the data flow diagrams. They're shown in the ETOs up here, like this. So we're assuming that all these tools and techniques, whatever they are in this black box here. So your inputs are processed somehow, which is your tools and techniques, and the output, in this case, is one output, the project charter. Now the project charter is now the input into the next process, which is develop your project management plan, now that you have an authorized charter on a project. And also there are outputs here to your project charter goes into other processes that we'll talk about when we get to them. But the primary output is to develop your project management plan. Here's our knowledge area process group matrix again. And again, you'll be referring to this not only in this course, but if you're going to use this methodology in your own professional career, you're going to refer to this thing a lot. So again, here's where this comes from, up there, the intersection between the initiating group and the integration management knowledge area. And here it is. And the other view is this thing is flipped in your PMBOK. It'll flip it, and it'll show it in the manner at the bottom that we just saw. And don't be scared of this, but again, this is again to map this to yet a third kind of diagram that we've already seen, which is the data flow. So you can see the red, project charter, develop it, there it is there. Here's your business case and your stuff down here. They come in this manner in the data flow diagram into there in your process, 4.1. Your outputs look like that in the data flow from here. And then this, which goes into some other process, happens to be, your develop project management plan process. And these purple arrows just show, how you map the inputs to the tools to the outputs in the various diagrams. So here's 4 different ways of showing much the same thing. So don't be confused now. I hope you aren't anymore when you look at these in the PMBOK. Say, oh, what is all this stuff? Well, they're all the same thing. Some just show more detail than others. In particular, the tools and techniques aren't shown on all of them. So don't worry about that. And notice over here, here we're going to flip to the next one that shows you just the data flow diagram. So here it is, same thing we saw. Charter goes out to help you develop the project management plan, but notice this, and remember the dark arrow means it's an output within its own knowledge area, within integration management. And the light gray arrows are external. They go to other knowledge areas. For example, your project charter is referred to for a number of reasons by scope management knowledge area. When you collect requirements from your stakeholders, you're going to want to talk to them, say, here's the charter, because at that point, early on, that's all you have is the charter with the attached original business scope of work. You want to refine that and get the actual correct detailed requirements. So you refer to the charter when you do that, and then you define the scope. And here's 5.1, 5.2, 5.3. These 3 are all part of project scope management. You also bring in the charter and refer to it as you develop your schedule, because your project charter will have things in it like major milestones that are set at the beginning. Your business will say, we need these 3 deliverables by these dates. Okay, make it so, Captain Picard. So that comes in to refer to those major milestones. Now they may change as you actually develop your plan and reality kicks in, but at least you have a guiding marker in the sand of what you're trying to achieve. Charter also goes into cost management, because there will be costs. Remember, you earmarked a bunch of money for use in your project, so you're going to refer to that when you do your cost management. Risks will come in. Project charter, you'll look at that, and you'll identify initial risks about being able to execute this project properly. And of course, stakeholders use the project charter because your initial set of stakeholders would be in there. Your initial set. There may be very many more as you go through this project progressive elaboration, right? So that's how this process data flow diagram is read. Now, why are we doing a charter? Why don't we just sit down and start cracking out a plan? A number of reasons, and we're going to talk about these in more detail here in just a minute. So we're talking about developing the project charter, and there's some key benefits to do this. The charter formally initiates the project. Okay, it assigns the project manager by name, if possible at that point, if not very soon after. But for sure, name or not, it assigns and describes the level of authority that the project manager has to proceed to execute this project, to commit funds, to commit resources, and to work with all the stakeholders. The high-level costs are in there. Your high-level milestones that the business requires, at least at this point, are in there. The scope and a high-level scope statement is in there that you will refine to the nth detail if needed to make sure that you deliver exactly what the stakeholder needs. And boundaries are in there, like don't do this, but make sure you don't go beyond this or do this kind of thing. That's all in the charter, and it will help you develop a good, solid scope statement and scope baseline that you will build. And of course, what you build are your deliverables, and again, they could be a product, hard product. They could be a service of some kind that you implement as a result of the project, or they could be this result transition, which could, as hard as it may be, could even be a culture change in your corporation if that's what senior management wants. And the example earlier could be just to provide a healthy environment that was not healthy before, and that is a result transition. So you got those kind of things, but they're all considered deliverables as part of the project. And of course, you really shouldn't go anywhere unless the sponsor endorses the charter, which says, yes, he's ready to support this, to have your back. He signs it and you're off and running fine. You can have your project kickoff. So that's the benefit of the charter. So now what we're going to do is what we're going to do with all the remaining knowledge areas. We're going to go through each one of the inputs, each one of the tools and techniques, and each one of the outputs, and describe what they are and why they are what they need to be. And we'll go through some of these really quick, and some of them we'll spend some time on because it's important that you know certain things about them. So let's see how this is going to go. Normally, I wouldn't show this piece of the data flow down here ongoing with the other knowledge areas, but I did just here just to make sure we've got our mind frame properly. But I will always show the input tool or technique or output up here, and then we'll list here and we'll go through them. So as we know by now, 4.1, develop the charter. Here's your input list. We know we need a project statement of work, high level. We need a business case, okay? And these are, from your initially competing projects that senior management, through some process they have, selects the ones they want to actually support and fund. Okay, that's your business case, what it helps them decide. Agreements, Again, could be existing orders that you may take advantage of during your project. Your environmental factors and organizational process assets. And again, just a reminder, the OPAs, they're resources available from your organization, and the EEFs, they're learned. They're things that you just learn about and understand in the culture, and they're created. One other way of characterizing those is they're created by using those process assets. The way you use them is the way it affects your environment and the influences in the success of your project. So it's kind of the way it works. And again, all software is classified as an environmental factor. Just that's the way it is. Okay, and your enterprise environmental factors, again, mandates, regulations, industry standards, they're out there. You have no control over these things. You learn them. Marketplace conditions, you got to understand them. You learn them, see how that works. You have no control over market conditions, and of course your organizational culture you certainly have no control over, although you can leverage that to your advantage if you're really skillful. Process assets, your policies, your standards that you can get from your company, from your PMO office, for example, procedures, process definitions, whatever you have. Templates, of course, is good to have. You don't have to recreate things, makes things much more efficient, like when you're creating the charter or stakeholder register, requirements doc, whatever. If you have templates, a lot easier for you to create those documents in a consistent manner. All of your historical information from past projects is there ready for you to review for similar projects. And lessons learned, of course, can be very valuable if you have those available to you, so that you can learn from them and avoid mistakes or capitalize on good things that happened on prior projects and how they did those things. So these are all your inputs. Tools and techniques. Many of the knowledge areas and many of their activities or processes, of which 4.1 is a process, all of the X point N, 5.3, 8.2, whatever they are, those are your processes. Okay. Many of them have expert judgment as a tool and technique. And what is that? Well, we're not going to be explaining this all the time as we go on, but keep in mind that in this case, develop project charter, your expert judgment could be, well, they certainly are, your stakeholders. They're the ones that you're going to ask the questions of initially. You may have consultants, experts that help you create the charter. Again, we're trying to create the charter here, so consultants could help you if they're skilled at that and you don't have the right skill set. They'll help you with that. Subject matter experts in your company could help you, and of course your project management office. They're all expert judgment that you should call on if you need any kind of help at all to validate what you're doing or just to get you going. You want to call on these people. That is a tool and technique, the primary one to develop the charter, because at that point all you have, remember, are your inputs, stuff from the business side. So you need to prepare your charter, get some expert judgment. Now if that's not enough to help you create the charter, you can do facilitation techniques, and they're very specific in the PMBOK to the degree where they do mention brainstorming sessions. You just, everybody gets in the room and you talk and you talk and you brainstorm, however you want to do it, to come up with ideas on how you can best develop and put this charter together. Conflict resolution, because you may have conflicting things at this very high level now. One person could say, I think that this requirement means this, and here's somebody else that says, I think it means this. And of course you have your stakeholder, he says, well, I think I mean this. Well, conflict resolution, get an agreement and then move ahead, which is also part of problem solving. So you have a lot of techniques you can use to sort out what it is you're going to put finally in the project charter that gets signed by your sponsor. So that's tools and techniques. Again, one and only output of this activity, and that's the charter. And look at all the stuff that you could have and should have in a full-fledged charter. Let's look at these. Of course, the project, the purpose, the justification, you can get that from the business case. Measurable objectives, I need this to be put into place so that we can accomplish something, as long as it's measurable, so that in the end you know that you've actually achieved that. You need to have that in the charter. Of course, you have your high-level descriptions and requirements. That's your project statement of work that comes in from the business. Assumptions and constraints. Again, this is going to be pervasive through many of our knowledge areas, and assumptions basically are bad because they're not clear. They're assumptions, and you have to manage them along with your risks so that an assumption doesn't turn into, well, I assumed that, but it didn't turn out that way, and now I got to do all this rework. So you got to manage your assumptions. You put your initial ones in your charter, and you progressively elaborate them, and hopefully they'll turn from assumptions into a definite statement somewhere. High-level risks at the beginning would be in the charter. That would start you off with your risk management. Again, your summary milestone would be in there, your what you're shooting for initially, and that could change once you finally get your scope and time together later on. Summary budget. Again, once you do your cost management, you will be refining that summary budget into an actual approved cost baseline that you'll manage throughout the project. project approval requirements, who's authorized to, on your change control board, for example, who are the people that will approve or review and approve change requests and sign the charter, and that should be at least the stakeholder. It could be the project manager also. It could be the manager of, say, a department that's the benefactor of the project deliverables too, could sign the charter, but at least the sponsor. The assigned project manager really soon, if not already, should be assigned by name along with their authority, and then you're going to assign in the charter, here's the people on my project, and then the authorizing authority, which again is the sponsor. And over on the right, a little clip again just to show that the charter goes into the developed project management plan. Ongoing, again, I will not show that kind of little diagram, but just again focus that that's our next thing. So what we're going to do is when we come back, we're going to talk about the second process in integration management, which is developing the project management plan. Okay, now we're going to talk about planning process group, and in particular 4.2, which is the develop project management plan process within integration management. As you can see here in the overview, it's circled, so we're there right now. And again, here's our normal view. We can see the project management plan. Okay, what it does, it describes how the project is going to be executed, how it's going to be monitored, how it's going to be controlled, and how it's going to be integrated and consolidated with all of its pertinent, what we call subsidiary plans and certain baselines. That's the project management plan. Notice the inputs are the project charter, because at this point in time early on, that's all you have. As we do our progressive elaboration throughout the project, as we start growing our documents, start building things and so on, you're going to have that second input, which is called outputs from other processes that come in here to help you fill out your project management plan, make it more discrete, more clear, more concise. And by the way, this is the only time that this term, outputs from other processes, is used throughout all the knowledge areas. It's a strange one, but remember, this is the only time you'll see that. And we'll have a little detail on just what that is here in a minute. So here is our data flow diagram. Now look at this. There's developed plan. Here we come with OPAs, EEFs. Remember what those are. Organizational process assets and environmental factors come in. You need to consider those. You need to consider your culture, because the way you create your plan, you may have to consider a lot of things that you've learned that you need to cope with, okay, to make the project work more smoothly. And then here is the outputs from other processes come in as inputs to help you develop the project management plan. And look at all this laundry list of things that they're talking about. And again, this is the only time you'll see this kind of input, where they call it outputs from other processes. Now we can look at that in a little more detail here. But first, let me mention that here, once you create, here's the input, by the way, from 4.1 that we just talked about. Your project charter comes in here also. And the output, a single output, again, in this activity, is your project management plan. And it goes into some more integration processes down here internally. But look at all the external knowledge areas and processes of those that use the project management plan. Why? Because that is your single most document that you will use to execute your project and build your deliverables. Look at all these things. Every one of them gets touched. So, very key document. So let's look at those outputs here again. Now, because you may not have a project management plan, if this is the first time and you've just signed your charter, you won't have these things. Okay, but as you elaborate your project, you will be getting inputs, getting feeds from these things in to help develop and fill out your project management plan. And look, I'm going to blow this up so we can see, actually read this stuff. Here it is. Your communications management plan is a subsidiary document of your project management plan. So you consider a big binder that's called project management plan. You'll have tabs for each one of these management plans. You'll have your communication management plan, your cost management, human resource, procurement, a process improvement plan will be there too. Quality management, your requirements management plan, risk management, look at all these, schedule management, scope management, stakeholder management, and your cost, schedule, and scope baselines are subsidiary documents. They're part of your project management plan. And any updates you may make will come into here. So that's what this output from other processes is over time. Okay, and of course you have your EEFs and OPAs. So now we see all the inputs. How are we going to create the plan given all that information? Well, again, gee whiz, expert judgment, just like we had with the develop the charter. Now this time you're going to tailor your processes if you need to, and it'll go in the plan so that you know how to execute your work. Change candidates, are there changes to be made at this point? You can identify those. Any kind of technical management details would go in the project management plan. Work prioritization advice, what goes before what would be in the plan somewhere, and a lot of other stuff. But expert judgment would help provide information for you to prepare your project management plan, at least in the beginning, with some of this information. And again, facilitation techniques, same as before, in this instance anyway. You want your team to have agreement, so you need your brainstorming, conflict resolution, problem solving skills as a project manager, amongst a bunch of other skills that we saw, to help actually create the project management plan. And the output is, one and only output of this process is the plan itself, and it consists of all your subsidiary plans, which are your 9 knowledge area, whatever it is, management plan, scope management plan, time management plan, procurement management plan, whatever. There are 9 of them. Now there are 10 knowledge areas, but the 10th one is project integration management, which doesn't have a plan per se, but it has your charter and your project management plan itself. And the second thing that you get with in your project management plan are your baselines, and those are your scope, schedule, and cost, your triple constraint baselines. So your subsidiary plans, all your management plans, and the baselines are all part of the project management plan. In addition to these items, change management, configuration management plan, your process improvement plan, your requirements management plan. If you've selected a particular life cycle, you want to put that in the plan. What levels of detail do you need? You may want to cite that if it's appropriate, and there's a lot of other criteria you could put in the project management plan. Notice many times throughout the PMBOK, you'll see the statement when they say updating the project management plan or updating project documents should be the risk register, but not limited to that. You'll see not limited to a lot of times, so don't think that you should only look at the specifically cited document to update. You're going to want to update that plus anything else that may be appropriate. That's the not limited to, sort of a legalese with them, so we don't get in trouble with missing something. Now look at this. This is table 4.1, and this lists the project management plan and all subsidiary plans and all the project documents. Now I list this just to show, because it confused me early on. Your eye reads across, right? From left to right. So I said, oh, change management plan has activity attributes and staff assignments, huh? Communication plan has activity costs and project statement of work. What? Well, really, you got to read it this way. They should have printed it this way, actually. Don't read them across, read them up and down. So here's all your project management plan documents and all your subsidiary plans, including your scope statement, baseline, and all that stuff. Project documents is different than the project management plan documents. So all your project documents are listed here, and you just read them alphabetically up and down like that. So hopefully, if it didn't confuse you before, or maybe you were, sharp enough to realize this is what this was trying to say, but if you didn't, this may save you a lot of mental grief if you just remember 2 different kinds of things. If there were a break between them, then it would be obvious from the beginning. And we're going to talk a lot about project documents versus project management plan stuff when it comes to updating them as outputs, because you update these things very often. So when it says update project documents, it's one of these things that you would update specifically, whatever the context is. So let's take a short break here, and when we come back, we'll get into the executing process group and actually the activity to direct and manage or build the work. Okay, let's get into the executing process group of project integration management. And we have one process in there, which is 4.3, direct and manage project work. This is where we actually build the deliverable according to our project management plan and any approved change requests that come through, which are in fact also a part of then the project management plan. So let's look at that. So direct and manage project work. What is that all about? It's about creating the deliverables by providing overall management of the project work. So you want to manage the project work that's specified in the project management plan and the detailed subsidiary plans, in particular the scope baseline where it has a WBS, which is what you're going to build. And so that's what direct and manage is about. Create the deliverables by managing the project work properly, given the tools and techniques recommended by PMBOK. So direction and management of the project work consists of quite a few things. Look at these. You want to accomplish the objectives of the project according to the plan. You want to create your deliverables. You want to allocate, train, and manage your staff to do those things. You want to obtain and manage your resources, which could be not just people, it could be rental equipment, for example. You want to take care of that. Manage your project communications, very key. Keep everybody informed. If you keep them informed very well, you'll avoid problems downstream with deliverables you didn't expect, or you may even increase the level of change requests because of your communications, but that's a good thing because you'd rather know it now and address those changes early instead of addressing them later on where the cost of rework may be just, terrible. So, communicate well during your directing and managing the work. You're going to generate performance data as you build things. You're going to have your tally sheets, your checklist, and whatever it is you're going to do. And then you're going to aggregate that as project manager. You may have one of your administrative staff do this to turn it into information that you can then use to track your project and make proper decisions. Generate and implement any approved change request into the work sooner than later, by the way. Manage risk. Always address your risk. Manage it through your risk management plan. Manage your stakeholders. Let's go back there. Manage your stakeholders is key because, keep them informed, keep them happy, listen to them, and determine when there needs to be a change request opened up or whatever. Collect your lessons learned, all through the project so that you can document them in the end and how you manage them, how you resolve them, and how you leverage them, for example. And then your stakeholder expectations is always out there. Manage what they expect you to be doing, what they expect to see, what they expect to deliver. That's part of direction and management of the project work under 4.3. Here's your data flow diagram. Let's look at this quick. Here's your enterprise, your OPAs, EEFs come in. We'll look at those in the next slide or shortly, what they are. From your project management plan 4.2, yes, your plan comes in, you execute work, and remember, you may do changes, progressive elaboration may cause you to update your plan or any of your subsidiary plans, and those, here they are here, feeding back in as update to the plan, back into project management. See this circular thing? Progressive elaboration at work here. From your change management plan, change requests come out from your direction. I need to make a change, I need corrective action here, I need a preventative action here, change request, or in this case now, there may be defects in your work that there's just something wrong. You may have to have a defect repaired. But anyway, your change requests go into one and only place ever, and that's 4.5, perform integrated change control. So within there, you have your change control board. They review this, and let's say they approve the change request, approved change request, go in there. So now you're doing the work, you have your approved change, you implement it in your work, and so on and so on. Other project documents that we'll look at, again, in a little detail of what is involved with 4.3's project documents. They are updated and output into project documents, into your files. And of course, your deliverables are your main output of direct and managed project work, because you're building your stuff, deliverables come out, and we know where that goes, right? One and only place. 8.3, you look at quality of what they're doing, what they've produced, the one and only input of your deliverables output. And then here we have work performance data. Now here you can get an idea of just where this data goes. Look at this. You have data in the validate scope, control scope, the schedule, the cost, control your stakeholder engagement. This data, you may want to show data, as you control, and it comes into control and it turns into information for your stakeholders. Procurements, risk, communication, data is out there, and that will be transformed into your information. So a lot of work performance data is output to various knowledge areas. And when we get into these other processes here, we'll see just how we use that data. So here's our inputs for 4.3. Project management plan, the main input, that's your guiding light. All the subsidiary plans and all the baselines are all part of the project management plan. You need to refer to all that stuff as appropriate to build the proper products. Your approved change requests also are inputs to managing your work, of course. This could be, as we mentioned, it could be corrective action, make this change, correct this, preventative change. Let's make a change here, let's change our process here because we're getting out of whack, we need to make an adjustment, preventative, so this doesn't happen in the future. Or if you see, maybe it didn't happen, but you see it trending up, you say, well, we want to avoid that, so we'll do a preventative action to maybe change the way we're doing our quality control so that we're better at it, so preventative action. And of course, defect repair, if you just build it bad, you got to fix it, and that would be coming in as an approved change to correct that defect. And again, the only approved change request input is to direct and manage project work. And there it is there. Then, here's our environmental factors come into play as inputs as we do our work. Now, what could those be? Well, the business culture, the way your people are building the work, how they're coding the software, how they're building this product, how they're working with vendors or subcontractors to build a service capability, whatever it is, the culture of your organization is at play here, and it will impact, how you do some of these things. Personnel administration is another one. How you're able to manage your people properly, as you're building the work. Are they going to try to pull people from you and put somewhere else? No, we can't have that. But these are things that are in the environment that you need to cope with. Your infrastructure configuration, just not how you're just organized, but it could be your physical infrastructure, like your building, co-located, not co-located, your computing environment, things like this. You need to consider all these things that are out there. You learn to use them, you got to cope with them, but you really don't have any control over them. You just got to deal with it to keep your project on track. Stakeholder risk tolerances is a big one. As you're doing your work, you have some stakeholders that could be very, very interested in what you're doing on a daily basis, and they'll be on your neck. How you doing this, building this? Well, I'm not sure. It doesn't look quite right. Well, we have metrics, Mr. Stakeholder, and it's within tolerance. Well, I think I'm going to lower my tolerance because that's just not acceptable. But you said, this, so you negotiate, and maybe you need to make a change to some of your metrics. But your stakeholder risk tolerances are certainly coming into play all the time. And here we have your software, which happens to be, in this case, your project management information system that you use to help automate many of the tasks you do. That will help you do your project and execute the work more efficiently if you're skilled at that tool. So those are environmental factors. Now, from the organizational side, you have certain process assets. As you're building your work, you may come up with, questions or issues. Boy, this was similar to a project they had 2 years ago when they were building something similar. How do they deal with this? Because now we're trying to build it, we're coming up against a problem. You look at the historical information to see whether there's any evidence there of how they handled a situation if they had that, and how you could leverage that to resolve your problem more efficiently or effectively than if you had no other information. Issues and defect management databases. As you come up with issues and defects, you're going to want to track all these things. And maybe you want to look at those as historical information. Did we have similar defects and issues, and how did they handle them there? To give you a clue to what worked and maybe what didn't work, so that you can be better at your job. Process measurement databases, particularly your quality control, or it could be if you're doing earned value management that we'll talk about in detail. And I mean detail later. Those have process measurements in them too, and you look at those. Communications infrastructure, again, is it email, is it phone, is it social media, whatever it is. How are you using that to help you build your product effectively? And of course, any organizational standards. All these are OPAs, and they all come into play. Now we're going to look at the tools and techniques when we come back in a minute. Okay, now let's talk about our tools and techniques for directing and managing project work. There's expert judgment again, although there's a little different focus here. If we look at this, you're going to want to consult other organizational units perhaps to get their inputs and take on how you're doing as far as creating the work, to see if there's perhaps some adjustments that you may need to make through change control, of course. Now that you're actually building the work, that's very critical stuff, so you may want advice from consultants, certainly the stakeholders themselves, your customers who are getting the work. Now you may want to get them involved, the actual end user, to say, here, we're building it, what do you think? And even though you're building it according to your plan, they may have other ideas, so you want to take all those, and if it's appropriate, make the proper adjustments through change control, of course. Subject matter experts, suppliers, sponsors, you want to consult them and get their expert judgment, because now you're actually building what they think they expect. Professional and technical associations are also good sources of expert judgment as far as, how might I approach this, what's the best practice to do this kind of function when we build the work. Go out and get those things, expert judgment. Anything that will help you assure yourself and your team and the sponsors that you're doing the best you can to meet their expectations and to get the job done on time, on budget, and what they want. So that's expert judgment. Again, now here's a little different here. Here we have your project management information system, but it's no longer classified as an organizational process asset, as an environmental factor. It is now a tool and technique that you use to help you execute the job. You would use like the scheduling engine within it to do your schedule. There may be a work authorization system within the PMIS where you can manage people's allocation to your projects and things like that, and bring them on the project at a time, take them off, and get it approved by the right management. That's work authorization. Configuration management of your documents. Remember configuration management? You could use this tool, and you need to learn how to use this tool, but there it is if you have one. And, key performance indicators, if you use that kind of metric, PMISs sometimes help you automate tracking those and reporting them. So here you're using it not as an input from the organization culture, you're using it as a tool to perform your job. So a little different focus than we had prior to this. And now we have meetings. This is the first time we've had meetings, although we inferred there are meetings and we have brainstorming sessions and so on earlier. But here are specifically meetings that you have during executing the work. And each attendee in your meeting has to have a specific defined role. You just don't want an audience in there. You want people that can contribute positively to your meetings, so they have to have a role assigned. The focus of the meetings could be many different kind of things, just like information sharing among those that need to know, right? Need to know. Again, brainstorming, get them together. We got an issue. What do you think? How would you do things? You gather information and you deal with it, from there. There may be a decision-making thing. You know, we got a problem. I think we ought to do this. No, I ought to think we do this. Well, then you do some conflict resolution. You decide, and there it is. But you do it in the meeting. And as best practice, you know, meeting types, you know, don't mix them. Don't try to information share and brainstorm and make a decision all at the same time. You know, try to segregate them so that you can get a purpose, get it in there, get it done, get out, and then next day or 5 hours later call another meeting for a slightly different purpose, probably even with a different set of, not exactly the same people. So, you know, don't mix them, don't get it too confusing. You want to have a definite purpose of the meeting, which also means a good, well-defined agenda. You know, you got to have control over your meetings, especially a time constraint. And you're going to want a timekeeper, just like any good meeting. Make sure you're on track so you don't waste a lot of time and you get to the core, get it done, and get out. And meeting minutes, you always have to document your meetings. Again, this is your organizational process assets. You want to file them, historical information. You may even have lessons learned as part of your meetings, because as you define these things, you make decisions, you share information. Could be good lessons learned in there too. So here's your tool. Those are your tools and techniques for helping you direct and manage your building the product. And your output, again, your prime deliverable is the actual, deliverable. That's what you're really doing. And what are these? Let's look at it again. Deliverable. A unique, verifiable product, okay, which is a product, a result, or a capability, as we know by now, to perform a service that is required to be produced to complete a process, phase, or project. So deliverable. Keep it in mind, definition. You may be quizzed on this. And the only deliverables, again, is an output from 4.3, direct managed project work. Nowhere else do you see deliverables as an output. One place only, here. And if you remember, there's only one place where that deliverable is an input to. Where is that? 8.3, control quality. Okay, and then it goes into scope, and then it goes to the client. So change requests are a natural output of managing the project work, because as you're working, you'll have changes that are recommended, either to keep you on track or to prevent you from getting off track or to do defect repairs. So here they are. Corrective actions. There's 9 citations of corrective action change requests throughout the PMBOK, 9 citations of preventative action throughout PMBOK, not just in this knowledge area, by the way, and 10 defect repair citations throughout, just to show you kind of the focus that these types of change requests receive throughout PMBOK. Now, this is kind of a vague thing in PMBOK, I have to admit, that if you're quizzed in a PMP exam on how many types of change requests are, well, what's the answer? If they say it's 2, 3, 4, or 5, what's the answer? Well, 3 would be a good answer, but maybe it's 4, maybe it's 5. Think about this. Updates, a change request update, there are 2 citations of that being a change request, and they are in integration management under 4.3, which is here. And in quality assurance, there's a citation that a change request update. So that would lead you to believe there's a 4th type. And there's also one change request for enhancements, and there's 1 citation of that, and that is in scope control as an output. So technically, there could be 5 types of change requests. So depending on what the question is, I'm sure they won't say 3, 4, or 5, but there may be saying, is an enhancement a valid change request? Well, the answer would be yes, according to the PMBOK. So just keep in mind that there are these 5 types that are mentioned throughout the PMBOK, but certainly the core primary ones are corrective action, preventative action, and defect repair. Now here's your work performance data again that comes in as an output, comes in out as data. Now these are your raw observations from the work you're doing to produce your deliverables. Like work completed, actual costs, the durations of tasks, the quantities, the number of changes you made, the number of defects you saw, just raw data. You're doing the work, you tell whatever has been set up as far as in your project management plan that you would gather this type of data would be in there, and you'd gather it as you're building your work, and that you'd ship that out as an output to appropriate inputs that we'll see later. And remember, you got your data versus your information versus reports. But the key here is data comes out naturally from producing the work. You may update your project management plan if it's appropriate. The plan itself or any of the subsidiary plans or any of the baselines that are in there could be updated because of your work, the way you produce your work. So those are valid updates. And here now we have the other flip side of that chart we saw before, project management plan here, all your project documents over here. So the project documents that they say may be updated most likely, but again, remember, not limited to, but most likely are your requirements document, Because, if you're building things, you have an issue, you talk to stakeholders, says, oh, okay, I really didn't mean that, or I meant to say this and this, so you may have to update your requirements so that you build that in through change control, of course, right? Yep. Your project logs, you have issue logs, assumption logs, constraints may change, all those things. Your logs for all these things may be updated as you're doing these things. Your risk register, may be updated as you're building. You say, boy, this is kind of flaky the way we're building this. It's working, but we may get in trouble later on if we don't build in enough, strength to this thing, whatever that may be. But yet it's a risk now. Well, we're taking a risk. If we go on just like this, something may happen here, so it's a risk. You put it in your risk register, so you update that document. And that risk register is a project document, one of the key project documents. And your stakeholder register is also a project document. And certainly, as you're building, talking to your stakeholders, you may have issue logs, which it already says up there, issue logs. But for your stakeholder register, as we'll see later, what the stakeholder register does is you classify all your stakeholders relative to their power in the organization, the influence they have over your project, whether they're a resistor to your project. They resist what you want, and you want to make them a supporter. You want to change their mindset to help you. You may want to update, and it's all in the risk register, as we'll see later. And real soon, actually, in our next module, we're going to start talking about stakeholder management. You may want to update your risk register. So all those are project document updates that come out of directing and managing your project work. So now that we're building this, overall, we want to monitor and control it. Oh, by the way, here again, for your updates, it says in the PMBOK, frequently says whatever document update include, like these things here that we mentioned, but not limited to. So there could be other things that are updated also, but the primary ones are always mentioned. Okay, now, when we come back, we'll talk about monitoring and controlling your project work. Okay, well, let's talk about the fourth process in integration management, which is monitoring and controlling the project work. So we've already developed our charter, project management plan. We're in the midst of executing the work, and now we need to, monitor and control it. And here it's shown here. We're going to talk about 4.4. So here's our ETO diagram, input, tool, technique, and output diagram. Monitoring the project work, basically what is that? It's collecting, measuring, and distributing performance information about how we're performing on the project. We can identify and manage risk during this process. Actual progress is now compared to the project management plan to see if we're on track with our baselines. That's under monitoring and controlling. We look at all approved change requests to make sure that they're good. As you see, validated changes come in and make sure that they're still good. We update cost and schedule as needed. For monitoring and controlling, we do our corrective and preventative change controls if needed. We validate corrective actions to make sure corrective actions that were made and implemented during direct and manage, we validate them to make sure that they were done properly. And we do status reporting also under this activity or process, which is 4.4. Here's our data flow diagram. Let's look at this quick. Here we are in the middle. Here's our process. So project management plan comes in. All of our work performance information now, other knowledge area processes out here have either received work performance information, or data that is, or other feeds, and they have created their own work performance information within the context of their own activities, and they all feed into monitor and control. So we can see that information, look at it, monitor it as it comes in, and then we have to do, oh, look at this, we need to control this, and then you take some controlling action. So you use that information to do that kind of thing. Down here under your schedule costs here, and you have your schedule forecasts, and here again we get into earned value forecasting, and particularly under cost, we do earned value forecasting. Are we on track now? If we keep up this rate, where are we going to be in 2 months? We're going to be out of whack, we're going to be whatever. So you do your forecast, and then you control them if you need to. And you have your control quality, of course, which you already saw, 8.3, that's where your deliverables come in, and you validate against metrics, and you say this is a good deliverable, or a change request come in, and you check that for quality, and you say, yes, it's a validated change. So that all comes into monitor and control, and your primary outputs here are right here. There are your change requests that may come out of here because now you're trying to control things, so you do change requests. Work performance reports come out of monitoring and control, and by the way, this is the only process where work performance reports come out of. The only process where you will see work performance reports as an output. Input to many other processes, your reports, but only here is the only output of the reports. And over on the left again, a lot of processes and activities give you information that you, as you monitor and control, you create reports for whoever your target audience is to give them the information they want so they're apprised of project performance. So that's that. And just other project document updates that we'll see go into like managing your team and communication, risk and procurements. But it all comes out of monitoring and controlling. So here's our input specifically, your project management plan. That's your how-to. Do all of that stuff, all your knowledge areas, how you're going to do it. That's input to help you monitor and control your project. Schedule and cost forecasts come in, as we saw, and you use those, you look at those to see if you need to create change requests for corrective action or preventative action. Validated, remember validated, not verified, validated changes come in. And what are these? These are approved changes which are properly implemented in the deliverable. You want to look at those. You know that they were because they're validated, so they come in, and you know that now for controlling and monitoring, you say, oh, here's a validated change. This should be the way it is. It's monitoring and controlling. And again, the only validated change input is to monitor and control. Nowhere else is that an input. EEFs, organizational process assets, come in, work performance information. Raw data transformed into information that helps you make decisions. It's actionable stuff. It means something. Help you make plans to make corrective actions or whatever it might take. So work completed, data might turn into status of deliverables. The raw number of change requests could turn into the implementation status of change requests, maybe categorized by changes and corrective actions or whatever, but information. And just raw actual costs, raw time it took to do something, you would use then to develop forecasts based on those trends on where you're going to be later. So that's monitoring and controlling. Those are all inputs. Now here's your EEFs. Industry standards, government standards, which you have no control over, remember. It may have an impact, help you monitor control work, give you a different aspect of things. Your work authorization systems, again, are a factor that you need to consider when you're controlling the work because they may impact you with the people that you're authorized to use. Again, stakeholder risk tolerances. As you see your raw data come in, you may see risk trends that you want to talk to your stakeholders about. Is that acceptable to you or whatever? And of course, your project management information system helps you monitor, control, automate some of these functions. Process assets, communication requirements, financial controls, issues, defects, procedures, your change control procedures, risk control, lessons learned databases, all those things you can use to help you monitor and control work. And some of these may be mandated by your company. You will do these according to this as you do your work. So those are your inputs. Tools and techniques, again, expert judgment. This time, anyone who has experience in determining the actions that are needed to align project performance with your stakeholders' expectations need to be considered. So anyone that can help you do this is an expert. So rely on them, get their input, deal with it as you need, but you're not working alone here. You have experts all over the place that you can ask. Now here we have some analytical techniques as you're monitoring and controlling your work. And these are the key ones, and these are used to forecast your potential outcomes based on your work performance. Regression analysis, you can plot, like defects in your work. You can plot those regression analysis to see how you're trending. Regression analysis, you got your line, you got all your points. If one point is way up here, well, what happened there? Well, maybe you need to correct some of the work processes that you're doing as you're building your deliverable. So this will show you that. Of course, root cause analysis, if you have defects, problems, whatever, you want to find what is the root cause, because if you can solve the root cause, you can eliminate or prevent many other problems that are from that root cause, rather than pick and choose little things here. Get to the root, take care of all of them. Fault tree analysis is another technique. We're not going to get into a lot of these details here. That could be a whole entire course on fault tree analysis. But fault tree is, why are things happening, and how can we, figure these things out and prevent them in the future. Earned value management is primarily a cost analytical technique, but that's how you forecast your costing. Are you going to be on budget in 8 months from now? Trending analysis, same kind of thing. Are you trending up or down with the number of defects, number of change controls, or whatever it is? Reserves analysis is another one, because as we're going to see later, we're going to want to put money aside in the budget for things that we think may happen, and if they do, we're going to want to fund them to fix them, but if they don't happen, then we can release that money. And there's more to it than that, but part of the analytical techniques is to do that as you're controlling your project. And there are other things too, but these are the key ones. So you have a lot of analytical techniques at your disposal that you can use as you monitor and control your project. PMIS, your management information system, project management information system. Again, here is a tool and technique. It's automated. You can use it for managing your schedule reporting, your human resourcing, financials, performance evaluations. You could use that too for your team, and your project records are in there too. So all this stuff you can use the management system for. And finally, we have meetings. Now, a lot of meetings here, they're a little more specific. There are different kinds of meetings. Face-to-face meetings, sit across the table. You can have virtual meetings over the web, for example, or over the phone is a virtual meeting. They can be formal with an agenda, which you should have. It's formal. You can have informal meetings, just go talk to your stakeholder if you just want a conversation. But if it's more important, you would want to then document it, so it'll be more formal. Meetings with your team members, your stakeholders, or anyone else affected by the project you may want to have a meeting with that will help you in your effort to monitor and control the project. So there they are. Now in a minute, we're going to come back and talk about the various outputs that you may produce during your work as monitoring and controlling your project. Okay, well let's talk now about the outputs of monitoring and controlling project work. So once we have our inputs, done our tool and techniques, we have certain outputs from this process, and here they are. Change requests being the primary output from monitoring and controlling, because controlling may need changes. So what are these particular change requests? Well, we're going to look at planned work versus actual results, and we may need changes to compensate for deviations to get things back on track. So change requests, they affect the project itself, the project scope, the schedule, cost, quality, baselines, change requests, whatever it might be needed to make an official change within the project to keep things on track is what the change requests are for. Now we issue work performance reports, and remember, this process 4.4 is the only process that issues work performance reports. So what are those? These are the work performance information that was aggregated from our data, so now it's actionable stuff, and we're going to report it for decision-making purposes, for awareness to proper target audiences. It may be status reports, it could be memos at that level, it could be action justification. Why did we do something? We issue a report for that. Recommendations, whatever we need. It's presentation quality basically versus internally routed information. Okay, and again, it's the only work performance report output is from this process right here. We may need to update the project management plan itself and its subsidiary documents. And here we have, in particular, we may need to update the scope management plan because that has our deliverable in it by way of the scope baseline. The actual requirements document or management plan may need to be updated as we're doing the work. We need adjustments that may need to be made for some reason to do that, so it's appropriate then to update the requirements management plan. The schedule management plan, how we keep our schedule, our time, how we're building it, may need to be updated and tweaked somehow. Cost management may need to be updated as we learn more about the costs. As we're building things, we get actual costs now, so we may need to do that. And quality, if we see continued problems or issues or good things with quality, we may want to update our plan to incorporate those things or to change it so we don't have bad things happen. It's all experience, and it's all based on what? Progressive elaboration is what we're doing here. And then you may update the project baselines, which are also part of the project management plan. The baselines, your triple constraint stuff, scope, schedule, and cost may need to be updated if we have to update the baseline, which we don't want to do if we can avoid it. And we avoid it by doing our monitoring and controlling work in a way where hopefully we don't have to do that. But if we have to do it, here's where we do it. Project documents, again, which is the other side of the fence from your official project management plan, and all the subsidiary documents and baselines could be, under the context of monitoring and controlling, could be your schedule and cost forecasts. Those are documents. We update those. The work performance reports that we issue are updated. And issue logs, which we'll see are primarily stakeholder-based issues that we get from our stakeholders as we interview them continuously. We have their issue log, and we need to deal with those in one way or another, either issue a change request from it or just resolve it with the proper parties or the stakeholder. So those are documents, the issue log, that would be updated, again, as part of the output from monitor and control. And that's it for monitor and control. Now, perform integrated change control. Here we are. Primary input, change requests. Makes sense, right? Primary output, approve change requests, and on a companion change log that keeps track of all that stuff. And the blue arrows, notice again, and in addition to change requests and approve change requests, one other item that is the only instance of an output of itself is the change log. It only comes from output from this process 4.5. So integrated change control, from inception, from the very beginning as you start your project charter, through your closure of your project, final closure, the integrated change control applies, okay? It's a monitoring and controlling process group. And remember that just that group itself is from beginning to end, and this process here, 4.5, is one of those processes that's within there. Project manager's primary authority, primary responsibility is to manage change, and he does it under integrated change control. And this is where your change control board lives, and these are people who are authorized to sit on the change board to review changes and discuss them and finally approve them or reject them. And the approval, the rejection of change requests, deliverables, documents, and baselines are all done in Perform Change Control. Configuration control, specification of your project deliverables and of your processes, keep those managed and configured and version controlled. Specifications are registered, and they're audited, approved, tracked, implemented under integrated change control. Here's the data flow diagram for it. Here we are in the middle. Look at all these inputs, and all these inputs are change requests. So like we said before, and here's the diagram that shows it, all of these processes that go between, let's see, scope, schedule, cost, quality, your project human resources, communications, risk, procurement, and stakeholder management, if they generate change controls, they all go to one place, 4.5. They all come in here. And the output would be hopefully approved change request. Well, hopefully is kind of a funny word. If it's appropriate to the project, there'll be approved change requests. And they go out into quality control and control procurements too. And we'll see why that is later on. And your change log, which we haven't seen before, but that is, again, the single output is from this process. The change log goes into, gee whiz, manage stakeholder engagement. Now, isn't that strange? Well, no, it isn't, because the stakeholders are the ones that want to know what's being changed on their project. So you bring the change log into them. Other activities like manage the work, they get the approved change requests directly, and they act on those. But as far as a list of all the changes that were made and approved or even rejected, go to the stakeholders so they can see just the dynamics behind what is happening with their project regarding changes to it. So that's what happens there. Also, the approved change requests go into, here's direct and manage, as we saw earlier, 4.3, approved changes, so now they change what they're building according to the approved change request. And that's pretty much it. You have this is typical, this diagram right here, project documents, updates, you got the symbol for all your documents. You'll see this a lot. And then some of these then may be inputs to other processes as needed. So the inputs, a little more detail, project management plan, in particular the scope management plan, how you're going to manage scope, that's the how-tos, the scope baseline, which is the specific list of what you're going to build and how you're going to build it, that's the scope baseline, and your change management plan, how you're going to manage, how-to again, how-to you manage the change comes in to change control. Work performance reports come in, and why? Well, you could have earned value management reports, your burn down charts, which could be in an agile environment. Resource availability reports could come in, and you need this stuff in integrated change control to help you make the proper decisions with your change requests. And there's more than that too. Read the PMBOK, you got to do that. Listening to this course is great, but you need to reinforce it with reading the actual material, because you'll get even more out of that, and it'll make more sense now that you've seen this. When you read the PMBOK, it'll make much more sense. So the primary output of Perform Integrated Change Control is obviously, or input, are all those change requests. They could be corrective action, they could be preventative actions, and these things may impact performance of your project. They themselves generally don't impact your baselines for corrective and preventative actions unless it gets out of control, and then you may need to change your baseline. Defect repair, again, is rework. Okay, so that may affect your cost or schedule baselines if you have enough rework where you're going to get out of whack on your money and on the time you have left after you make fixes to complete the project in time. So they may have an impact on your baselines. And again, Perform Integrated Change Control is the only place where change requests are inputs. Environmental factors, what's involved there? Now here we have your project management information system as an input this time. And that's because it's your schedule management tool, configuration management system. It's where you collect information and you distribute information using that automated system. And it may have web interfaces to other online automated systems. That's what that tool could provide. So it's an input to you. Other systems that are mentioned in PMBOK, and we'll see this in a little detail. We'll try to sort these out and clarify them in a little while. But you could have something called just an information management system, which basic function is to take information, aggregate it, and distribute it properly, automated-wise, and your records management system, which is a sub-part of your project management system. Keep all your records and documents in there. So there's others there that we'll see, but they specifically cite the PMIS here as an input to perform integrated change control. And your process assets are, change control policies, procedures, process measurement databases. All your project documents could come to bear as you're working with integrating your changes throughout, and configuration management databases also, and it has your baselines and versions of things in all your documents, so they could all be inputs. Tools and techniques available to you are expert judgment again. Call in the experts that have experience with change control to help you, assess what you need to do if you're unsure. You're going to have your meetings, and you can have change control meetings. Obviously, that's your main type of meeting under Perform Integrated Change Control. And their job is to approve, reject, or belay proposed changes. Maybe they're not clear enough. Maybe you need the stakeholder's advice, so you belay them. And the stakeholder will help you decide whether to approve or reject them. And you have certain change control tools at your disposal, hopefully. And they could be either a manual paper change control system, or they could be some automated tool where you put in all your change control data, and it's reported to all your constituents and then to your change control board, of course, and they'll make the decision, enter their decision in there, and it can go through your PMIS into your doers that are creating your deliverables, so they can make the proper adjustments. And in a second, we're going to wrap up this particular process with outputs in just a minute. Okay, so let's talk about the outputs from integrated change control. The main output, of course, is approved change requests, and again, this is the only process where this is an output. These could be, and these are directly then input into direct and managed project work, again, the only place. 4.3, direct and manage, is the executing process. So we monitor, control, make our change, approve it, put it into execute, is what we're saying here. And then we update the change log, whether it's approved or not, so that the stakeholder has access to that and can see what's going on with our changes. And one more time, approved change requests, outputs only come from this process, and the change log output only come from this process, one place only. Your change log that we're talking about, all changes are tracked, approved or not, they're on there, so that your stakeholder can see, what's going on with the project. Your PM plan is updated as needed in all your subsidiary documents, baselines, whatever it might be that you're changing because of the change request that was approved. You may need to update some of those documents. And some of the project documents, exclusive of your project management plan documents, may need to be updated. And any or all documents affected by the change process, whatever they might be, need to be updated as an output of this process. So that's it for performing integrated change control. Very key of holding your project together, of keeping you on track, of eliminating scope creep, hopefully. And the main place where changes come in, or the only place where changes come in and are considered and approved or rejected. Now, our last process within project integration management is close the project, close the phase, and here it is. The benefits of doing this, well, you have formal project closeout. You formally release all your human resources. Okay, you just don't say, oh, project's done, we're done, thanks for helping me, go see your boss. Well, no, there's a formal way of doing this. Most generally, if you have a work authorization system, you would put it in there, release your resources. And you have this thing called administrative closure. This is a lot of paperwork activity. It has to do even in your procurement side of things. You may need to make sure all your contracts are properly closed. You don't have litigation open or issues. You want to make sure they're all properly fixed and closed. So here, administrative closure means satisfy the completion and your exit criteria, whether it's the phase and you go back and do stuff again, or it's the whole project. You transfer your deliverables either to the next phase if you have to build upon them, or you turn them over to your customer as part of the administrative closure activities. You close all your phase or project records that you're going to file away. All of your audit files, whether it's success or failure, whatever your audit files are, you want to wrap those up, close them properly so they're on record. And in bold here, very important, well, not that the others aren't important, but this is very much overlooked. Your lessons learned need to be properly completed and documented and filed away. And you want to then archive all your project information into your organizational process assets. And this is one of the times where we actually update the assets again. So you want to make sure you do that and archive your project. So let's look at the data flow. This data flow looks pretty simplistic compared to some of those that we've seen. So here's your project management plan. You need to know what it is we're doing, come into the project. All your accepted deliverables, the efforts of your work, come in here, and you'll turn those over here to your client, and while you're at it, you're going to update your project organizational process assets. And that's pretty much what it is. And let's look at the inputs a little more detail. Your project management plan, that comes in as we mentioned. Your accepted deliverables, they come in from validate scope 5.5, the only place they come from, as it says there, and your process assets. Inputs could be things like if you have project or phase closure guidelines where your PMO or your organization says, here's the proper way to close a project, we want these things to happen, you'll get those. Historical information, lessons learned, databases are updated with things like your project records, documents, all the closure information, the results of project selection decisions, which is way at the beginning. You want to close all that stuff and document it. All your performance information you want in there, and then of course information about how you manage risk, and all that stuff would be in there. So you want to close out your project properly and use these as inputs to do that. Okay, and to do this again, we're going to rely on expert judgment. The primary validation function is expert judgment. You need to sit down and say, can we close this? Are all the knots tied? Is everything good? Do that with experts. Analytical techniques, future outcomes, regression analysis, trend analysis. Were we on track? How are we going to deal with this kind of stuff? And finally, meetings. You want to review everything, your lessons learned, and finally have a closeout meeting where you release everybody properly. And final outputs, very simplistic. The final product goes to the client. Again, big enchilada. This is it. Turn it over to them. Transition to the customer. Ask to get paid, finally, because you've turned it over to them. And I say that kind of facetiously, turn it over, get paid. You may actually have in your project management plan graduated payments throughout the project. It depends what it is, but so I'm not saying that you only get paid when you deliver stuff, but basically that's the way it works out. And that's the final product is the output, the only output. And you have some organizational processes, updates there also, which could be all your project files, all your closure documents, and of course your historical information. You do all that and your project is closed officially, and you need to also, as we'll see, align this and coordinate it with your procurement closeouts too, because you're doing that at the same time under procurement management, and we'll see that when we get there. So let's make a note here that, and I mentioned this again way up front when we were talking about these things, but your organizational assets, process assets, are updated 14 times across 10 different knowledge areas, so it's quite a few times. Your enterprise environmental factors are only updated 2 times in one knowledge area, which is human resource, and they come from these 2 activities that we'll see when we talk about human resource management. You're developing the team, okay, that's training and so on, and then managing the team could be things like performance assessments. So those are the only times when the actual environmental factors can be updated. The culture of the company, the skill levels of people, so that's very interesting, and that's the statistic. So that is project integration management. So now that we see that and we see how that pervades everything on the project, now we're going to get into the very specifics of the other knowledge areas. We're going to start with stakeholder management because, again, not in the order of the PMBOK chapters, but in the order of if you were to have a project that had to be sequential, which is not very likely, but if it were, like in this kind of presentation here, where we can't integrate everything at once, you're going to want to start with your stakeholders. So once you get your project and your charter and your plan approved, now you go talk to the stakeholders and you get aligned with them. And then we take it from there. So in Module 6, we're going to talk about identifying those stakeholders and then planning on how to manage them. So we'll see you in Module 6.